Your Bibles, John chapter 13. John 13. In the vein of a prayer warrior, may I recommend the book to you called Hearing God. Have a conversational relationship with the Lord. It's written by Dallas Willard. It will revolutionize your prayer life. Hearing God. I don't throw that out there just so you can go, oh, look, a book. Really, I recommend that you get it, that you read it, that you chew on it, that you let the Lord speak to your life through it. It is an excellent book. Let's go before the Lord. So, Father, as we come to you this morning, we first of all acknowledge readily that you are our God and that we are your creation. We recognize that apart from you, we are just dried up branches, capable of nothing at all. We are so totally dependent upon you, as Paul reminded the church that it is in you that we live and move and have our being. So, Lord, let us this morning live on the word that you speak. I ask that you would enliven this attempt of mine to expound on your word, that you would be honored and glorified. Thank you, Lord. Amen. It's really easy, as I mentioned earlier. There that thing went. It's one of my markers from the back. I'm like, where did I put that? Sorry, I'm squirrel. I'll get back on track. It's really easy, as I mentioned earlier, in the midst of walking in a relationship with the Lord, become very distracted by following after squirrels, so it were. To see something that is right before you and to miss its significance altogether. And so it is that we come to the Lord's Supper missing its greatest significance. For you see, as we walk through this event, as we see it not just isolated, but also in the context of the entire evening that led to Calvary, we see this subtext that runs through it, this message of service. Indeed, it was at that Last Supper that Jesus deliberately took great pains to drive home to his disciples this issue of service. John records it this way. He says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come and that he would depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come forth from God, and that it was going back to God, got up from supper and laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself." Now, we usually just kind of blow over this to get to the Lord's Supper. But as John records it, John spends a paragraph setting the stage. He says, you need to understand something. That as Jesus got ready to do this final consummate act, this Lord's Supper that we talk about so beautifully, illustrating the sacrifice of Jesus, there were some things that were on Jesus' mind. One was the fact that, he knew that his time was here. He knew that the events of Calvary were about to unfold. He knew that this was the will of God. He also knew that in the heart of Simon, that Satan had placed this desire to betray him. So all of this kind of coalesces, and rather than be anxious about Golgotha or relieved about the fact that it was finally happening, or distressed because of Simon's betrayal, Jesus says it's really important that I teach them what it's all about. And so he gets up and he lays aside his robe and he ties a towel around his waist and he begins to wash their feet. Now, I don't know if it's possible for us to really accurately capture the glimpse of this. That their rabbi, that God in the flesh, took upon himself the role of a meager servant, got down and washed their feet. I really don't know that we can that we can fathom that. I really don't know that when we think about Jesus, that we can embrace with the depth that it deserves the fact that God became a servant. That rather than taking this moment to teach them, something about what was happening, he instead resorted to his very basic character, that of a giving, serving God. Because it is service that lies at the heart of the kingdom. If it had not have been, then on this moment, Jesus would not have stopped and poured the water in the basin, verse 5 says, and began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. It says that when he came to Simon Peter, Simon said to him, Lord, you're going to wash my feet? And Jesus answered and said to him, What I do to you, you don't realize, but you'll understand later. And Peter said to him, never shall you wash my feet. Jesus answered and said, if I don't wash you, you don't have a part with me. And Simon Peter said to him, Lord, then not only wash my feet, but also wash my hands and my head. And Jesus said, He who has bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew that one of them was betraying him. For this reason he said, not all of you are clean. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garment, he reclined at the table, and he said to him, Do you realize what I've done for you? Through the years, this phrase will echo down. It echoes to you today. Do you realize what I have done for you? Do you realize that in the person of Christ, He has done for you? And I'm not just talking about Calvary, okay? That's the easy answer. To say, oh yes, I realize that Jesus died for my sin. That's really the easy answer. But do you realize in this act, he says to the disciples, do you realize what I have done for you? And Peter would shoot up his hand and go, oh, me! Yes! You washed my feet! He would. I mean, didn't he say that earlier? Oh, no, come on, Lord. You know, he knew that there's something not right here. And when Jesus says, well, I got to do it, he goes, well, then the whole thing. I mean, if a little bit's good, a lot's better, right? So Peter would jump up and say, yeah, I realize you've washed my feet. And we have brothers and sisters that still do that. They run around and they say, oh, you've got to wash one another's feet. It's an ordinance. Not only are you supposed to baptize and observe the Lord's Supper, you're also supposed to wash one another's feet. And I think that Jesus kind of goes like this and goes, no. I'm not saying you need to do what I have literally done. I guess in a way he was saying to them, do you understand what I've become for you? That I've become your servant. Because see, in just a few hours, in a few weeks, this mantle of servanthood would pass to these disciples. And if they didn't understand that their role would be to serve him to the world, it would go nowhere. Do you understand what I've become for you? And I don't think that we do. I think we understand that maybe Jesus has done something for us. I think we understand, we acknowledge that he went to the cross for us, but we don't acknowledge that what that means to us, that what he did was more than just some act, but it was an essence of his character, that he served us, and it expressed himself in one way by going to the cross. It expressed itself in another way by the creator of the universe coming in the form of a man. It served us in another way by him walking this earth for 3.5 years and spending time with his creation and revealing himself. It served him another way by sending his Spirit forth to touch the lives of people and to draw them to him. He's not talking just about this act of service, but he's talking about who he is as a servant. Because take a look what he says in verse 3. You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right. That's indeed what I am, who I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. And you go, hey, there you go, Pastor. That's what it says. We should wash one another's feet. All right? And I'm all for being literal. Okay? I'm a literalist. I really am. But don't just yank that verse out of context. You got to go to the next one. He says, you ought to also wash one another's feet, for I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. I like that word for. It's one of them connecting words. Why should you wash one another's feet? Because I've given you an example. And you go again, you go, well, there it is. He washed their feet, that's what he says. Why are you just going to stop with Jesus washing their feet? Why don't you take a look at the rest of what Jesus did too? Right. Don't just stop there and say, well, he washed their feet. Yes, he washed their feet. He met their need. But that was who he was. Jesus is, understand this, lock this away. Jesus is the quintessential issue in all matters of faith and practice for the disciple. You cannot be a disciple of God without considering Jesus. Now, you may say, well, that's a no-brainer, that's real simple to understand. I would say, well, it's a little more difficult to understand, because there's a lot of other examples that people would rather have. They'd rather have their pastor or their favorite Bible study teacher or some person on TV. They'd rather have a favorite song. I remember a friend of mine that would always say, oh, there's this song that touched my heart. And hey, I'm all for songs touching your heart. But, some people, it seems, just really reverence those. They want to build their life after a song. And, well, I don't quite think that's what Jesus had in mind. Some people would even go so far, tie your tennis shoes, hold on, cinch your belt. Some people would rather have the Bible be their example. You know what we call them? Pharisees. The Bible's great. I love the Bible. I've devoted my life to the study of the Bible. But the Bible's only good insofar as it leads me to the author. As it leads me to the Father. Jesus is our example. If you're a disciple of Jesus, Jesus, not just in what he did, but in who he was, is the example in all matters of what I believe and what I do. He is to be my life pattern. That's a good word for example, don't you think? I look at who he is, and I ask myself the question, if Jesus were me, how would he live my life? Notice I did not say if I were Jesus, okay? I said if Jesus were me, because you see, Jesus wasn't married. Contrary to what some people say, Jesus wasn't married, okay? I am married. So, if Jesus were me and he were married to my wife, how would he be to her? Jesus wasn't a father. I am a father. How would Jesus be to my daughter if he were me? Jesus wasn't a pastor. I am a pastor. But if Jesus were me, what sort of pastor would he be? Those are the questions that I need to ask. I need to look at him and I need to see the simple fact that he goes, I am your example. But not just my example. And not just your example, but even the lost person's example. Understand this. I really think that the majority of people who are living life really want to be okay with God. I mean, there's a few out there, and maybe that number's increasing, but I really think that if you went to most people and said, look, do you really want to hack off God? Then most people would say, no, I'm trying to be a good person, trying to be nice. All of that. If you ask that, I like the question, if you were to stand before God today and give a reason for why he should let you into heaven, what would you say? I like that question. Because, it really is a good question. Because how people answer it, well, I've tried to be a good person. They're kind of focused on works. And so you go, okay, all right. And I think most people would answer that way. Some people might tell you, oh, well, I don't believe there's a God and all of that stuff. In which case you say, thank you, I'll pray for you. But most folks will say, well, I've tried to be a good person. I've tried to do the right thing. I've tried to be a good husband. And I go, okay. You know who your example is? Jesus. If you want to be a good person, you can't get any better than Jesus, right? So, even for you, Jesus is your example. Now, the funny thing I find about it is if you try to be a, follower of Jesus without being a follower of Jesus, you find out pretty quick you need to be a follower of Jesus. Okay? It's kind of like saying, I want to emulate a cop, I want to dress like a cop, I want to talk like a cop, I want to walk like a cop. Pretty soon you're going to find out you better join the force or you're going to go to jail. Okay? If you're going to try to follow Christ, at some point you're going to realize that you can't just do what he did. You need to become who he was, a servant of God. So Jesus says to them, I am your example. You should do as I did to you. Now, I really want you to take a look at that verse with me for a moment. You should do as I have done to you. Too many times we do to one another things that just aren't right. I had a friend of mine, it was really funny, one time we were talking, and he's a pastor, and he's been in ministry a bunch of years, and anytime you get pastors together and they start talking, if you can ever get past budgets, bulletins, and buts, all the things that seem to matter to preachers, you get to the hurts. And preachers will talk about, oh, I had this difficult situation, or I had this difficult situation. And this guy just kind of stood there listening to us talk and shakes his head. He goes, yeah. He says, if you're in ministry, he goes, all of us have hurts. He goes, all of us have wounds. And some of them are in our backs. And we went, oh, ouch. Don't we do nasty things to one another? Instead of, he says what? Do as I have done. Don't do as you have done. It breaks my heart when I see young pastors looking to models of the world to lead churches. It breaks my heart when I see church members grasping to principles of the world to relate to one another and to relate to God. Don't do to one another as you have done to one another. Look to Jesus. Let him be your example. In your faith, in your purity, you understand that the life he lived, the interactions that he had with others, redeemed, unredeemed, nice, friendly, clean, dirty, you name it, that the way he was is the way we're to be. Jesus isn't just this bright, shining example of what we cannot be. He is the example of what we can be. Now, chew with me on this a minute. I know I'm trying to push a rope. We've got this idea that who Jesus is, we can't be. The only problem with that is the fact that that's not what the Bible says. Jesus lived, Philippians 2 says, as a servant. And that should be our attitude. So the life he lived, we too can live. Now, I'm not saying you become God in the flesh. Don't go home and say, Pastor Jim said I get to rule creation. No, I don't want you to. Neither does your spouse. And definitely your children, they already know how you rule. But the sort of person he is, if you're a follower of Jesus, you can be. Jesus said this when he first made his appearance on the scene. He said, the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So in looking at Jesus, we say, well, we can be the sort of person who serves and who isn't served. Now, there's one problem with that, right? The world says that you get served, you don't serve. So you're going to have to go counterculture. But hey, we're up to that. This is also the goal toward which the Holy Spirit of God is working in the life of all who claim to be followers of Jesus. Paul said to the church at Corinth, there's different kinds of workings of the Spirit, but the same God who works in all of them. To each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. The Spirit comes into the life of a person, and this has not so much to do about making me sparkle and shine like I would like to think, and it has more to do with God serving through me to touch the lives of others. It is a manifestation of the Spirit given to the common good. You with me on that? As Jesus manifested the Spirit to care for others, so too would his children. Not only this, but John, in just a few chapters, would write this. He said, I tell you the truth. Anyone who has faith in me will do what I have been doing. He will do even greater things than these, because I'm going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Son may bring glory to the Father. What I do, you'll do. Matter of fact, you'll even do it greater. How can I do greater than Jesus? Doesn't mean greater in quality. It's kind of hard to top what Jesus did, right? Raising the dead. Boy, although I have that privilege every Sunday, as I say, and in closing, the dead come back to life. Okay? If Jesus raised 4 from the dead, if you raise 5, is that greater? That's what he's talking about. I'm here and I'm doing this, but I'm going to go to the Father. The Spirit's going to come, and what I do, what he did through me, he will do through you. Greater will happen as you go throughout the world. We are designed and destined to be servants, to serve other people. I'm your example. What I've done, you likewise should do. And then get this, I love this. Truly, truly, if you're a King James Bible fan, verily, verily. You ever use that in the real world? You're watching, football, verily, verily, touchdown! Just doesn't carry the same power. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is the one who sent greater than the one who sent him. You get what Jesus is saying there? You're not any better than me. What I've done, you're going to do. If it's good enough for me, it's good enough for you. Now, maybe that's not how your translation renders it, but that's what it says. I did it, you should do it. That's what Paul was referring to in Philippians chapter 2, when he told them, hey, this was Jesus' attitude, let this be your attitude. Good enough for Jesus, good enough for you. If being a servant, if serving God, if being a servant of the kingdom was good enough for Jesus, what makes you and I think that we're above that? That somehow, I should be served. Well, let me tell you something. You have been served. Okay? The King of Glory left heaven, came to earth, walked, lived, died, rose again. You've been served. Now, if you've accepted that, if you've received that wondrous gift, you've been served. Okay? If you walk, as Paul said, if there's any joy, any consolation in the Spirit, any fellowship with Him, you've been served. So start serving. Start pouring out your life, because that's the essence of the kingdom. Notice what he says in verse 17. If you do these things, you are blessed. Now the word blessed there literally means happy. It doesn't mean, big house, fancy cars, skinny, good looking, rich. I don't know. You pick bless. What it means is joyous, happy. One of the reasons that Christians tend to be unhappy, I heard this line, I stole this line, it's not mine, but it's great. It says, when fishermen don't fish, they fight. Okay? When fishermen get away from what they're supposed to be doing, they fight. And when Christians get away from what they're supposed to be doing, they fight. Okay? They pick on one another. They pick on other people because they've gotten away from what they're supposed to do. But Jesus says, look, if you just do what you're supposed to do, happy. It's good. It's all good. It's kind of like Dean. Dean's sitting there in a hotel room waiting for the surgery. And he's a joyous man. He's just delighted. He's relaxing. He's just, I could wait like this forever. Yeah. He's sitting there going, let's get this thing on the road. Come on. He's probably a little agitated, brother. A little anxious. Okay? Here we run around and, we're doing everything other than what we're supposed to do. And we get a little agitated. We get a little nervous. And we start picking on one another. Listen, when you do what it is you're to do, when you be who it is you're to be, Jesus says there's a joy. I didn't mean to say that there aren't problems. That's a problem with the word blessed. We go, God's blessed me, I have no problems. I have a child. My wife has a husband. We all have problems, right? There's always going to be issues. But when you're walking in relationship with the Lord, He's there. It's good. You're blessed. If you do these things, blessed. Listen to what it says in the book of Acts. It said they called the apostles in. Apostles been out sharing the gospel, telling people about Jesus. It said they anointed them. They gave them lots of money. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's not what it says. It said they called them in and they had them flogged. Then they ordered them to shut up. Don't talk about Jesus. And they let them go. And the apostles left the Sanhedrin rejoicing because they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name. Leave that hanging in the air for a moment. You mean I might get flogged? Yeah, you might. You might. You honestly might. But the Lord's still there. He's still good. These guys lived, they got the message. If Jesus had said to them right then, you understand what I've done to you? They'd have said, yep, we got it. We're servants. And just like they abused Jesus because He served, they're abusing us, we got it. We're going to do what Jesus did. We need to understand that. We need to lock in. Somehow, you need to grasp the idea that Jesus is the example of life. He is the life pattern. He's not just some example out there of God's love. He is that. But He is your example, your life pattern. If you're not a follower of Jesus, He's still your example. Follow Him, because at some point you're going to have to join. You're going to have to, because you're going to say, I can't do it without Him. It's designed that way. So follow Him. Do your best. That's what He wants you to do. Follow me. Be my example. Another point. we should expect that our life would be no different than his. The life he lived should be the life that we live. Now, please, I hope you understand I'm talking beyond the surface issues. I'm not asking you to grow a beard. Some of you ladies would have a really hard time with that. I'm not asking you to wear a tunic. I'm not asking you to, speak Hebrew, although my Hebrew prophet really loved that. Thinks that's the language of heaven. I'm asking you, I hope you understand that who Jesus was is who you are to be. That the life he lived needs to be manifest in you. If Jesus were you, what would it look like? I need you to grasp that. Because what you're looking for in life, that contentment, that's only found there. There's nothing else offers it. And you can chase your tail all day, and nothing else will get you there. So you see, before he ever got to the Lord's Supper, he's explaining to these guys this essential point. Because if they didn't understand the life of service, this would mean nothing. Because this is nothing but a testimony of service. I'm pouring out my life for you. I'm offering my blood for you. And whenever we do this, it says that we proclaim him. If we don't get the point that this is just another act of service, then somehow this becomes sacrosanct, and you believe that it's okay just because I've eaten bread and drank wine. This is another example in the life of Jesus of his servant heart. So I want to ask you to bow your heads, close your eyes, and wait with me before the Lord. What has Jesus done for you? Just consider that for a moment. Father, to the heart of each person that is here, I ask that you would bring to remembrance how you have served them. That you would overwhelm them with your care, your love, with your confrontation. You would help each of us to have this personal encounter with you right now, that we would be able to answer the question, what has Jesus done for me? And we could elaborate. Something beyond, he died for my sins. For Father, you have been actively in our lives beyond just one day. For Lord, it's important for us as we come to this table to realize that you are a servant. You have given your Son, and you ask us to give ourselves to you as well. Lord, in a few moments we're going to lift up that bread and we're going to hold that cup. And Father, it'd be my heart's desire that as we go from here, we would lift up our body and, even if necessary, our blood for you in an act of service. Be with us, I pray. Amen.